Good evening, good evening, everybody. Pray that you all had a good weekend, made the most of it. I'm definitely excited about this week. I'm excited to be kicking off another new book. Ezra was a great time, a very fantastic time, and very glad for all the things that we were able to see and the way that the Lord revealed His truth to us. And so today we're going to be in Nehemiah chapters 1 and 2. Hey, what's up, Tiff? Give me just a quick second here, you guys, and I will invite a few people, and then we will dive right on into the text. Very excited. I was very encouraged as I read here in the book of Nehemiah this past week and weekend leading up to today. So again, give me 10 more seconds and we should be good to go. All right, let's see here. Say that's everybody. Okay, cool. All right, so Nehemiah chapters 1 and 2. Quick shout out to the squad. You guys already know the amazing job that you all do. So I appreciate you week over week. We had to cover down last week as Angela was enjoying a much needed time away. So we're very excited to have her back this week. And if you guys did not have opportunity to check her out this morning at 7 a.m. on the Wildfire Devotion, it was a good time. So you guys go check that out, and then we'll be hearing from her on tomorrow. So, okay, Nehemiah, right? Let's deal with Nehemiah. As we close the book of Ezra, Brenton brought to our attention some qualities that a leader should possess, right? And he began to walk through the life of Ezra and the things that he did. And as I was looking at Nehemiah, what we're going to see another picture of what a leader should look like, right? Another picture of how one should conduct himself. And so again, I'm very excited to dive into this. So let's go to verse 1. It says, "These are the memoirs of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. In late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was at the fortress of Susa. Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and how things were going in Jerusalem." So where Nehemiah comes on into the scene, it's about 75 to 80 years after Ezra, I believe, after the second set of exiles had returned back to Jerusalem. And so now his brothers and some of the other men, they come up. The text doesn't make it clear as to why they were coming to see Nehemiah, but nonetheless, they were coming to see Nehemiah. And so Nehemiah asked them how things are going amongst the people. And as we're going to see as this chapter unfolds, in the life of a believer, nothing happens by coincidence. Nothing is happenstance. Nothing is coincidental, right? God is not a God of coincidences. He's not a sign. He's not a God of luck. He's not a God of fate, as society likes to teach as well. As fate has decided, or whatever your fate is type stuff. He's not a God of that, right? So in the life of a believer, we understand that we live our lives with purpose. So that all the events that happen in our lives, they're for a purpose, right? It's either number one, it is something that God is trying to teach us specifically by the things that we go through, or it is an opportunity for something to partner with his ultimate plan for our life as well, right? So these guys coming to see Nehemiah is going to stir something inside the heart of Nehemiah. Again, so that's why I'm saying nothing happens by chance. Although the text does not make it clear as to why these guys were coming to visit, their visit was intentional by God so that it could stir the heart of Nehemiah for what we're about to see next. So again, in the life of a believer, understand that when you meet people, when certain conversations come up, and it opens up the door for you to share from the truth or from the wisdom of God's word with other people. When all of these things begin to happen, they're not by chance, because we live life for and on purpose, right? We're not just wandering around aimlessly, allowing things to happen with no understanding as to why things go on the way that they do, right? We understand that our God is intentional and our God is a God of purpose. So I wanted to point that out, because now it says, so now he asked the question, what's up, B? What's up, Philip and Miss C? Good to see y'all on. Verse 3 says, they said to me, things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. It says they are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. So again, Nehemiah asked the question from these guys, and they tell him, look, man, things are not good at all, right? This is the current state of Jerusalem. So let's see what happens, because now Nehemiah has a decision to make. So it says, when I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. Then I said, and so now he's about to go into this prayer. And one of the things that I found interesting just here at the beginning of this, right, is the fact that Nehemiah cares more about his people than he does his own self, right? The fact that he sat down and wept for days, he mourned and he fasted and he prayed to God for days, right? A lot of what we see today is, well, if it's not on my doorstep, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't affect me, I'm not going to do anything about it, right? If the problem is not right here inside of my home, it's not directly affecting my wife, it's not directly affecting my children, it's not directly affecting my family as a whole, my bank account, it's not bothering me, I don't need to do anything, right? I'm not concerned about it. But that's not the way, number one, that God wants us to be, right? So what if certain problems they're not right at your doorstep? Jesus calls us to have compassion, right? Care and concern for other people. And so we see this here with Nehemiah. He begins to fast, pray, and mourn for his people, right? And so it says, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commands. And when I read this, I had to stop for a second, because it really it really humbled me, because if you listen to these words, it says that he keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commands. And it simply just reminded me, you all, of how awesome it is that we have the person of Jesus Christ to have done what he did for us, right? Because it humbled me in the fact that I looked at myself and I said, I don't always act as though I love him. I don't always obey him, right? And so then as I began to think about that, it just brings me back to the fact that God's love for me is not predicated on my performance. It's not predicated on what I can do, but because of his son, because I identify with his son, now when God sees me, he sees his son, the only one who submitted in complete obedience according to Philippians chapter 2, verse 8. He subjected himself to complete obedience, even death on a cross. And now because of that, I don't have to worry with, well, if I don't obey today, is God's love going to run out, right? If I don't get it right today, is his love going to cease? No. And it's a great encouragement for us. It was for me, and it was a very humbling moment. And just a good reminder, because sometimes we can get so puffed up on ourselves, and we think that because we're doing everything right, we're doing all these good things, that the things that we receive from God is predicated on us, but it actually has nothing to do with you. The only reason that you are where you are, that you have what you have, that God's favor is on your life like it is because it initiated with his son. And that's why we have escaped God's wrath, right? We have escaped from death to life. And so I enjoyed seeing that there, that humbling moment. And so verse 6 says, listen to my prayer. Look down and see me, praying night and day for your people Israel. I confess that we have sinned against you. Yes, even my own family and I have sinned. We have sinned terribly by not obeying the commands, decrees, and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses. So Nehemiah, he has an understanding, right? Brenton talked about it on Thursday when we looked at the life of Ezra, right? God's hand was upon him because in Ezra chapter 7, verse 10, it says that he devoted himself to studying the law, right? Not only studying it, but to practice the law, and then he was teaching it to other people. So now we see a similar understanding here with Nehemiah, right? Because he says, we have not been obeying the commands and decrees and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses. And this is really crazy because God was very clear in these laws, right? If you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28, right, 27 and 28, you see that God lays out blessings and curses, right? If you do this, I will bless. If you don't do this, I will curse. And so because Nehemiah has familiarized himself with the book, now when he hears the report that things are not going well for the people, now he understands, well, there must be something wrong, right? We've not been doing what we need to be doing. And you, ladies and gentlemen, that is the only time that we lose as believers. The only time that we lose as believers is when we're not doing what it is that we're supposed to be doing. When we decide to take the path of disobedience, when we decide to take the path on our own, when we decide to make decisions outside of God's plan and outside of God's will, outside of God's word for our lives, it is only then that we begin to experience loss. Because what we're saying is, you know what, Lord, I can handle this situation on my own. You just take the back seat and then I'll handle it on my own, right? I feel good enough about it. Let me handle it. But then when situations turn and they go left, then we're wanting to get back to him and be like, oh, God, now help, right? But that's what happens when we make decisions without him. And so now Nehemiah hears the report that things are not going well, and it automatically draws him here to the word, and he knows that it's because of sin that things are going wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, at no time in our lives can we sin successfully. There's no moment in the life of a believer that we can sin successfully. Just because you may not have gotten caught yet, just because it has not been revealed yet, do not trick yourself into thinking that God's not paying attention, that he does not already have a discipline process in place for what you're doing. So again, Nehemiah realizes that there's sin. And I love this because he says he doesn't single anybody out, right? He says we have sinned terribly by not obeying the commands, decrees, and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses. And I love this as a leader because he identifies as a whole with the people, right? In today's world, today's society, what we love to do is we love to point the fingers at everybody else, right? We don't want to identify with those that are doing wrong, right? We want to stand back in judgment and say, well, this people, they're not doing right. They're not doing right. Or even on your job, if you're supposed to be a team, but you oftentimes have some people on the team who are very quick to, if something goes wrong on the team, they take a step back and they say, well, I wasn't working on that project. That was so-and-so. He was heading up the project. He's the one that missed the step, right? Instead of taking ownership as a team and as a unit, you begin to single folks out. And I love the fact that Nehemiah gives us the example here that he is not singling anybody out, but he is saying we have all sinned, because he understands that they are all one people, all together, right? And so I just thought that was a really good example for us, right? That when something goes wrong, even in the body of Christ, we are a large body. We may have different denominations. We may have different churches. We may have different, some differing views on certain things. But at the end of the day, if we have identified with Jesus Christ as our Savior, we are all part of one body. So when one part of the body hurts, we all hurt. And when we see things not going well within the body, it should draw us to a place like it is with Nehemiah and praying on behalf of what's going on. Not singling anybody out, not pointing the finger, but it should bring us to a place of prayer. And so it says, verse 8, please remember what you told your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful to me, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands and live by them, then even if you are exiled to the ends of the earth, I will bring you back to the place I have chosen for my name to be honored. The people you rescued by your great power and strong hand are your servants. O Lord, please hear my prayer. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. Please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Put it into his heart to be kind to me. And then it concludes with, in those days, I was the king's cupbearer. And so that's how chapter 1 closes out. The fact that Nehemiah gets the news and then he begins to pray on behalf of the people. And as Nehemiah began to recite the promises and what God had already stated, it just reminded me of how important it is for us to make sure that when we find ourselves in situations, that all we do is we simply just stand on what God's word has said. Nehemiah understood that there was redemption for the people, but it required them to turn back to him. And that is the foundation of Nehemiah's prayer, just the promises of what God has already said. And so even for us, when we find ourselves in those tough spots, in those tough situations, we do not bring up these things to God as to remind him of anything, but it's more for ourselves, right? Have you ever said something like in your head, over and over again, but it really didn't take root until you started saying it out loud? And then once you started hearing what you were saying out loud, then it began to change your perspective or began to change your outlook. Simply, that's what's going on with Nehemiah. And so now Nehemiah has asked for favor from the king. And so let's bounce over to chapter 2. And it says, early the following spring, in the month of Nisan, during the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was serving the king his wine. I had never before appeared sad in his presence. And so I want to point this out real quick. The fact that Nehemiah was a cupbearer. Now, Nehemiah had the opportunity to return. When Ezra, when Zerubbabel, when all the exiles, the first and second groups went back. But he decided to stay. And we see that his decision to stay is now going to be used for God's purpose. Right? Now, the history doesn't make it clear what I was reading as to why he chose to stay, but he wasn't just a servant to the king, right? Cupbearers, yeah, they tasted the wine to make sure it wasn't poisoned and things like that. But if the king were to ask them a question, they also served as the king's advisor as well, right? And so maybe Nehemiah had a plan all along to stay in place until he could talk to the king. Who knows, right? But again, what's interesting about that is that he made the decision to stay. And so now it's going to be used for God's purpose. So it says, so the king asked me, why are you looking sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled. Then I was terrified, but I replied, long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. Don't allow your fear to cause you to miss an opportunity. Because in this moment, had Nehemiah just went along and said, oh, everything's fine, everything's good, so on and so forth, had he not been honest with himself and with the king about what was really going on, he had the possibility of missing this opportunity, right? The fact that he was terrified, because again, here he is talking to the king, right? Which could be a very scary thing to do. Approaching a kingdom ruler like that, yeah, kind of scary. But even in those moments, don't allow your fear to cause you to miss the opportunity that God has for you. And a lot of times we will, right? We start talking to ourselves, start psyching ourselves out, and then instead of living by faith, we live by what we can see. We live by the sight, right? The way that things appear, that's what we begin to focus on. Instead of focusing on living our faith out, right? Because this is what Nehemiah prayed for. Nehemiah prayed for, God, give me favor with the king, right? Yes, God is going to give you favor, but you have to make sure that you walk this thing out. See, that's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. We want to ask God for things. We want to pray earnestly for things. But then what we want as well is we don't want any opposition. We don't want any pushback, right? We don't want anything to go left. We want it to be a walk in the park, right? We want it to be as though God give me the favor as soon as I show up in front of the king, or as soon as I show up in front of whoever for whatever the situation is, you just put it on their heart. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to have to say anything. You just give it all to me. But if that's the case, if God just gave us everything that we asked for, and he did not allow us the opportunity to exercise our faith, how then do we grow? You cannot teach your kids to mature if you give them everything. If you continually give, and you're never allowing them to learn things, you're never allowing them to exercise the things that you've taught them, right? And so again, I love this moment for Nehemiah, because although he asked God for the favor was not going to come if Nehemiah did not open his mouth. If Nehemiah did not walk in faith, although he was scared, he still had a part to play. If you go to Hebrews, the 11th chapter, and you begin to look at all these different examples of the faith. Moses' mother, she put him in the water, floating down the Nile River. But she had faith. Yeah, who wants to place a baby in a wicker basket to go floating down the Nile and trusting that God takes care of him? To the natural eye, that doesn't make sense. To the natural eye, that is scary. But had she not done that, then Moses probably would not have lived. He would have been killed. Since that was the order, right? To take all the Hebrew boys and kill them. But by faith, she made that decision. And so in this moment, Nehemiah makes the decision to open his mouth, although he's scared. So what am I saying? I'm saying that although it looks scary, although you are unsure of yourself, although that your self-esteem in the moment may not be where it needs to be, you may find yourself just like Moses. God, I stutter. God, I've never led people before. I have this disability. There's no way I can do it. That's good. That's really good, because you need to be honest with yourself about how you feel. You need to be honest with yourself about your inadequacies. You need to be honest with yourself about who you are. See, because when you're honest with yourself about who you are, then it allows God to step in and show you who he is. So don't walk around like everything's okay. Don't walk around like everything's cool. When in that moment, you need to exercise your faith so that God can step in and move. And so again, don't allow your fear to cause you to miss an opportunity to be used for God's purpose. Let's keep moving. Because look at what verse 4 says now. The king asked, well, how can I help you? So now the door is open, right? I love this next moment. Look at this. Now, keep this in mind, you all. They're in a conversation, right? Nehemiah has just told the king, hey, this is what's going on. And the king says, how can I help you? So now it's on Nehemiah to give a response. But let's look at what Nehemiah does before he gives the response. Crucial. It says, with a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied. And so before we get into his reply, let's just focus on that line for a second. Here he is in dialogue with the king. But he takes the moment, now that the door has been opened, and he prays. He prays to God. And now we're going to see in this reply that God gives him the exact words that he needs to accomplish the purpose. See, a lot of times what happens is God opens the door of opportunity and then we take off running. We take off saying, it's okay, I got it from here. I needed you to do the hard part. But now this right here, this is easy, right? I'll handle it. That's not the example. The example that Nehemiah is setting, okay, God, I see that you've opened the door. Now give me the wisdom on how to function in the opportunity that you have just set up for me. See, because Nehemiah, Nehemiah could have asked for a lot of different things, right? Maybe Nehemiah's pride could have risen up. Maybe he could have said, you know what? What'll make me happy? I need you to build me a big house. I need you to do this. I need you to do that, right? And I love the fact that now that the opportunity has been open, he still invites the Lord in again. And ladies and gentlemen, on this journey of our lives, it's important that at every moment of every day, we are inviting the Lord in. Before we go out on our jobs, before we engage in maybe what needs to be a tough conversation with our spouse or our children, or before we make any decisions, it's important that we invite him in and we ask him for the wisdom necessary to deal with said situation. James 1:5 says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives it generously. So again, Nehemiah prays in this moment. And here's another thing that it shows us. It shows that it don't take you 72 hours. You don't have to lay prostrate before the Lord. You don't have to roll around on the ground. You ain't got to tell said person, give me 72 hours, let me go pray about it, and then I'll get back with you. No. What does this show? This shows that even in the middle of a moment, you may be in the middle of a big decision, right? And they need to answer, whatever it may be. Because you trust God, you acknowledge him, and you trust that he will respond to you. And that's exactly what Nehemiah does. He trusts God enough. I've acknowledged you. I've invited you in. And now in the midst of this moment, I'm praying to you and I'm trusting that you're going to give me the words that I need to say. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what it looks like to be Spirit-led. We trust God for every step of the journey. And so he says, if it please the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. The king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked, how long will you be gone? When will you return? After I told him how long I would be gone, it says, the king agreed to my request. Now, as I was reading this, some scholars suggest that this is the same Artaxerxes that dealt with Ezra. Some suggest that the other Artaxerxes was a son of the first and all of this stuff. But if in fact that these turned out to be the same king, it's amazing to see how with several different people, God is still working on the same king to fulfill his purpose. And so I thought that was just an interesting side note. Let's jump down to verse 8. It says, and please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me timber. I will need it to make beams for the gates of the temple, fortress, and for the city walls, and for a house for myself. And the king granted these requests because the gracious hand of God was on me. So he asked for letters to the rulers in the province so that they would allow him safe passage. So when they see him coming through, all he has to do is present the letter from the king and they back off, right? And so now he asked for letters to be given to Asaph so that they can get all the stuff. And what was interesting about this is this is just the result, ladies and gentlemen. When you invite him in and you allow him to lead and guide your steps, he does the miraculous. He does exceedingly and abundantly above. Why? Because it's for his purpose. And when we align ourselves with that, when we invite him in, when we submit to his purpose and to his plan, he begins to move in the way that he wants to move. So now he grants him safe passage. So he's got to get there. to fulfill the purpose. And then he has to have the right tools necessary to fulfill the purpose. So again, God will make the way. We have to invite him in first. So let's jump down to verses 11 and 12. So now he's made it to Jerusalem. It says, so I arrived in Jerusalem 3 days later. I slipped out during the night, taking only a few others with me. I had not told anyone about the plans God had put in my heart for Jerusalem. We took no pack animals with us, except the donkey I was riding. After I went out through the valley gate, past the jackal's well, and over to the dung gate to inspect the broken walls and burned gates, then I went to the fountain gate and to the king's pool. But my donkey couldn't get through the rubble, so though it was still dark, I went up the Kidron Valley instead, inspecting the wall before I turned back and entered again at the valley gate. The city officials did not know I had been out there or what I was doing, for I had not yet said anything to anyone about my plans. I had not yet spoken to the Jewish leaders, the priest, the nobles, the officials, or anyone else in the administration. Next point that I want to make is God's plan for you is not for everyone to hear at one time. God's plan for you is not for everybody to hear at one time. We see here that Nehemiah, he makes it to Jerusalem, and then he begins to get to work. He understands the mission, and he's determined and he's focused to carry it out. And so he slipped out in the middle of the night, so nobody's going to ask him what's going on, right? If it's during the day, somebody will see him and say, hey man, what are you doing? What's going on? But it says he slipped out in the middle of the night. Took a few people with him. And then he began to inspect the walls. So before he reveals the plan, and again, this just speaks to the type of leader that he is, he looks at the work, right? Because what type of leader stands up in front of people and says, hey, we're going to do this. And then when they ask the question, well, how are we going to carry it out? I don't have any action steps for you. That doesn't produce a lot of confidence in people. And so Nehemiah takes it upon himself to keep quiet. Although God's gracious hand was on him, right? He decides to keep quiet about it. Because here's the problem when we talk too much. Had Nehemiah went around saying, hey guys, I'm here. Let's rebuild the wall. Let's get it done. Advertising. More than likely, there was going to be somebody who said, if we do that, then they're going to think we're rebelling. If we do that, then we might have opposition. And then you get one person being negative, and then it begins to spread like a cancer. Then everybody starts becoming negative. And then what will happen is because we decided to tell people prematurely about what God had put in our hearts, then we begin to question the very thing that God had put in our hearts. Why? Because we talked prematurely and we allowed the opinions of people to cause us to question what God has said to us. Too many voices leads to confusion, especially within Christianity. Those who profess to be believers, because everybody's got an opinion, right? But let me tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, you're the only person that God has spoke to about the specific plan that he has for your life. You are unique. You are the only one that can carry it out. Or if it was for everybody to do, God would have said it to everybody. But God didn't say it to everybody because he spoke directly to you. So whatever the plan is that God has given you, keep quiet about it until he has given you, until he has released you to tell those around you. Because you don't need any added distractions. You don't need any added weight. You don't need any added discouragement. And so Nehemiah, He's focused on the mission. He keeps quiet. And he goes to inspect the broken walls. See, because how can he go back and rebuild if he doesn't know what's going on? Right? If he's not spending any time looking and inspecting, how can he figure it out? And so I love seeing this because we notice that Nehemiah is being observant. And that's another thing about a leader. A good leader is observant. He's focused on the mission and he's observant. Nehemiah takes it upon himself to go inspect the walls, see what's going on. Another thing that I'll say is understand your audience as well. Even if it's people that's close to you. Understand your audience. Because some people might not be prepared to handle the weight of what it is that God has given you. And then because they're not prepared, or they may become envious of you. They may be jealous. Well, why didn't God speak to me to tell me to do this? What makes you think you're qualified to do this? What makes you think that you can get it done? Again, then we allow those voices to come in and to discourage us. So let's make sure that we're revealing at the right time. So verse 17, but now I said to them, you know very well what trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. Then I told them about how the gracious hand of the Lord had been on me and about my conversation with the king. They replied at once, yes, let's rebuild the wall. So they began the good work. So now that Nehemiah was patient, he waited for the right time. He went and looked at the work that needed to be done. Now he reveals the plan and he spares no detail. It would have been one thing if he said, hey, let's just rebuild the wall. But then he goes back to the conversation between him and the king. And he tells him everything that went on between them and the king. So that means I asked for letters for safe passage. I asked for timbers from Asaph to be able to build the wall. And so now, because he's revealing God's favor to the people, now that gives the people hope. That gives the people something to look forward to, something to hold on to. Because now, when they're getting ready to rebuild the wall, they look at the way it lined up. God allowed the king to give you safe passage here. God allowed the king to give you all the supplies that you need in order to get this done. And so now that we see God's hand in this moment, we know that we can carry out the work and fulfill the purpose. And so I love seeing that with Nehemiah in this moment. And so verses 19 and 20, and then we'll be out of here. It says, but when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, the Arab, heard of our plan, they scoffed contemptuously. What are you doing? Are you rebelling against the king? They asked. I replied, the God of heaven will help us succeed. We, his servants, will start rebuilding this wall, but you have no share, legal right, or historic claim in Jerusalem. Again, Nehemiah has allowed this moment to shape his faith. But it started because he invited God in. And then when he was presented with the king, he opened his mouth, although he was afraid. And now God has moved on his behalf. So now that builds his faith a little bit more. So now, when God has made all the provisions necessary for the purpose, there's an enemy, Sanballat and Tobiah, and Geshem. So now when they come against him, Nehemiah has something to say. Nehemiah understands that, God, you've already made all these other provisions. So now when I'm faced with this enemy, I have the proper response. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there will always be somebody to criticize the work that God has called you to do. Always. Always count on there being somebody to be like these guys and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And we're going to see it. We're going to see more of this opposition come. But as we continue on this journey, as we begin to reflect back on the things that God has already done. No, God, you already did this. You set this up this way. So now when I look at this enemy, I've got the proper response. I don't have to cower in fear. I don't have to take a back seat. I don't have to allow my faith to be diminished. I don't have to allow my faith to be outweighed by fear. Because if you did this, if you made the way here in the presence of the king, I know that you'll give us success on rebuilding this wall. I know that you will give us success in carrying out the purpose that you want us to do. And so whatever that looks like for you, ladies and gentlemen, carry out the purpose. Whatever God has put in your heart, look back on all the other ways he's made to set you up for this moment. All the other doors that he's opened, the opportunities that he has presented you with, the things he has lined up in order for you to complete the purpose. So now when somebody comes up, a naysayer comes up and they try to discourage you from the work, you can look back and say, no, God's made too many ways for me to allow you to stop what he's called me to do. And so again, he says, the God of heaven will help us succeed. We, his servants, will start rebuilding this wall, but you have no share, legal right, or historic claim in Jerusalem. And so as we open up this book and as we kick it off, I love seeing the example that Nehemiah sets for us. He intercedes for the people. He puts his faith on the table, although he's scared. And he allows God to do what only God can do. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's Nehemiah chapters 1 and 2. I appreciate you guys for being on tonight. Again, very excited about where God is taking us as we continue to grow in his word. So let's pray. Father, we love you. We thank you for today. God, I thank you for the example of Nehemiah. I thank you that we're able to see his concern for his brothers and his sisters. And God, I pray that you help us to have a heart of compassion for our brothers and sisters affected in the body of Christ. God, that we would pray for them. We wouldn't single them out, but God, that we would pray for them. Father, I pray that you would help us to put our faith on the table, even though we're scared. God, not forgetting the promises of your word. Our knees may be shaken. Our hands may be trembling. We may have all these nervous sweats and all these other things to deal with, God. But I pray that you continue to help us to put one foot in front of the other. God, to shut our eyes to the things that are going on around us, to the distractions. God, and to center in and to focus on what you've said, what you have called us to do. I ask that you would do that. God, I pray for Angela as she has prepared and is going to be speaking on tomorrow morning. Father, I pray that you would give her clarity of thought. God, that you would continue to reveal to her all that you would want her to say to us on tomorrow morning. And God, that you would be glorified in everything that we do. We love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Again, appreciate you guys for being on. Angela will be on tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. in chapters 3 and 4 Then Marcus will be on Wednesday in chapter 5, and then Brent will be on in chapter 6. So again, if you guys have not been reading this book of Nehemiah, I strongly encourage you to do so. And just allow God to open your eyes to what it is that he wants you to see. All right. Love you guys. Peace.